Welcome back, viewers. You are still tuned into Prime Live. I'm so privileged to welcome an incredible individual by the name of Brenda Snyders, who is the director at RDSP, better known as the Rural Development Support Program. Now, we're going to be talking about the incredible work they do in rural areas, in communities in South Africa when it comes to gender-based violence, whether that be creating awareness or supplying tools and resources for victims. They are absolutely incredible in what they do and what they're able to provide for communities in South Africa that don't necessarily have these resources. Brenda, thank you so much for joining us on Prime Live.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for inviting me to be part of your program.
You know, I think this is such an important conversation. And when it comes to gender based violence, it's all about providing much needed education, support, and awareness, particularly within our rural areas in South Africa. So I really want to start our conversation by commending you on the incredible efforts that your organization has done to make that possible. But to start on, to get our conversation kicked off this evening, I want to talk about, the background. Can you tell us a bit more about the background of the organization, some of the history, as well as the vision or mission of the organization as well?
Yes, RDSP has been around for quite a number of years. It's all started back in 1991 when there was the original concept. RDSP was born out of the Catholic Church. And then there was a need identified to do some work in the rural areas. The original concept was to place skilled people from urban areas to go and work in these rural areas. But after some research was done, it was then I decided that it's far better to identify new community development projects or activities that was starting off and to train those community volunteers who were part of those rural activities so that the skills and the knowledge can remain in the rural area instead of putting people there for a while and taking them out. And that has always been our methodology, is to train local community volunteers to do the work.
I think that's an incredible way to make an impact in community, especially when you are giving tools, resources, and information. You're actually empowering those individuals in those communities to spread the message, to spread the empowerment, and to spread the growth. And I think that is an amazing way to approach community development, particularly within rural communities, is upskilling and empowering people. I think that's incredible. But can you talk to us a little bit more about some of the initiatives and some of the programs that you have when it comes to your activation in rural communities?
Well, we have a few programs. So the gender-based violence is one of them. Then we also have an organizational capacity building program. I'm sure a lot of people have seen in the news the deregistration process of non-compliant organizations. So that's a big thing that we try and address through our programs because those are the people who provide the services. And obviously, to receive financial support, to be able to get donor funding, they need to be compliant. So that's a big part of what we do, training people on what compliance means, the different areas of compliance, also connecting them with the different institutions who they need to be compliant with. For example, last week we had the SARS come to our session in the Northern Cape where they spoke to people at our session. They checked their compliance status. So we're also in the process of arranging with them to go through these rural community and assist them with registering right in the local community because the financial thing, it's a big challenge when it comes to traveling to the bigger cities to become compliant. Then the substance issue is also another big challenge in all communities that we're addressing, also through providing training on that. Yeah, also training the local community volunteers to run info talks, to do puppets for the younger kids, the 5 to 9 year olds, to run support groups. So there's a whole lot going on. And yeah, so we identify the need in the community, meet with the local community volunteers, find out what is their exact need, and then design a program for that community.
I really love that the organization is able to address so many different issues that are being experienced in these communities. I think it's so important to lend a helping hand in each and every one of these respective areas where the need is so great. But I want to steer our conversation back to the aspect of gender based violence and talking about how the aspect of cultural attitudes as well as biases, our own biases, are able to condone the idea of domestic violence. How are you able to navigate the ideas around these cultural sensitivities that do exist within communities that might actually perpetuate the idea of domestic violence or violence against women, while still you're able to advocate for the safety of women and the protection of women at the same time?
Yes, it does become an excuse to say this is in our culture, it's acceptable in our culture. And I think the biggest challenge is to use the culture to your advantage so that, because I don't think any culture wants a negative connotation attached to their cultural activities and practices. So, so to make sure that they understand that what you are doing, and if they understand gender-based violence, a lot of time women come and it's in a way because it's a cultural norm, they accept it. This is the way we should be treated. But once they actually learn that it's not just cultural, it links to abuse. It's becoming abusive. So the culture is just an excuse. Yeah, so I think the one thing is then to focus on the difference between the cultural activity and what is abuse, and for them to see the link for themselves and not for me or for whoever's facilitating to point that out, because then it becomes judging their cultures. Um, so just giving them the facts, and then they will start to see, but this is actually not culture, it's actually abuse. Also to focus maybe more on their rights. It's again coming down to facts. This is what the Domestic Violence Act say. This is your rights in terms of the Constitution. This is what the Sexual Offences Act say. So I think not to focus so much on cultural, because that has been developed, over many years and decades and generations. Um, and I also think maybe from generation to generation, it's also changed a bit. Um, and some take it too far so that it actually becomes abusive and it's not a cultural activity anymore. So, but yet to remain sensitive and respectful to the cultural activities that they have.
I think in that way, that's how education becomes so important. It's being able to educate people on, these definitions of what constitutes domestic violence, what constitutes sexual violence. I think it's important for, creating some much needed sense of education and being able to allow people to draw those lines on, where it ends, where culture starts and where
Yeah.
violence starts. I think it's a very important thing. And I think there's definitely a great need for that in South Africa as well when it comes to, being able to educate communities, because when it comes to, these, like you said, a lot of the time it's blamed on culture, but sometimes it isn't even part of culture. It's just these,
Mm.
these sexist biases that exist within communities,
Yeah.
that need to be addressed and maybe also alleviated in that way. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important, the work that you're able to do in these communities. But what I also wanted to ask you this evening, I know that tools, resources, and information like this is so powerful in terms of combating gender-based violence and also being able to empower a victim with them having, the ability and the access to understand what their rights are, where are their rights defined, and what they can actually do about a difficult situation. Can you perhaps share some information with us on that as well?
Um, yes, I think it's very important, and it has to do with the kind of services. Um, and what we find in the work is that you can give the people, or what we call victims of violence, those who are still trapped, and we do find a lot of young girls in that situation, is to give them the tools, the knowledge, but at the end of the day, it's still their choice, whether they want to address it and in which way. And we also recently we had a program that was more focused on equipping youth with life skills. And some of them, for the first time, could speak openly about their abusive relationships. And some of them have managed um, to either move on or to really speak up for themselves. But it's about that self confidence. And if nothing changes in that way, so if the self confidence doesn't increase, then you can give them all the tools and the knowledge and the information, but nothing will change. So it really speaks to the issue of, the change starts with you. So you first need to recognize your self-worth, your self-confidence, and your value, and then you will be able to address the situation. And we do find that happens quite a lot. So it's you can give them the information on the GBV, but a bit more than that is needed. So you also need to work on their personal growth and development.
Absolutely. I think that's very powerfully said. I think when it comes to violence in general, what happens a lot is statistically it's been proven that anyone who has, experienced any kind of violence at a young age or witnessed any kind of violence at a young age, of course, has a higher chance of becoming a perpetrator later in life, especially when it comes to young children. They say a lot that children, they don't learn from what you tell them, they learn from what they see. And growing up in an abusive household can absolutely, of course the trauma, but of course also perpetuate and almost create an understanding of that is how conflict is handled, or and
Yeah.
I've seen myself with young children who grew up in abusive homes with some of the organizations I had the opportunity to work with, is that they understood that when mom and dad had a fight, this is how it would happen. So when we have an argument with a younger girl or a girl in class, this is how we deal with the argument, or this is how we stop the argument rather. So I think what you've mentioned there is incredibly important, is the education aspect is incredibly important, and also understanding the kind of support that a victim might need is incredibly important as well. But I mean, your organization does such incredible work, and I'm sure it is not an easy job to be able to bring all of this together and bring the much needed support. And I guess my question to you is also, how can the community get involved? How can our viewers assist? Are you open to donations? Is there any way or form that we can contribute? Because I feel we have to promote this sense of active citizenry, that if we are in a position to assist, we absolutely must. Are you able to share any details or information on how our viewers can get more involved?
Yes, thank you very much. We've got what we call the Mary Lack Community Grant, which was started in the name of one of our late board members who was very, very passionate about community work and especially rural development. So we've got, and we are a registered PBO, so we are able to offer the 18A certificate. And if they can have a look on our website, which is the www.rdsp.org.za, all the information to provide a donation can be found on there. And especially if we look at, because another program that we started was some of the economic empowerment, where we donated some ovens to some of our organizations, and they are baking bread and all sorts of lovely things which they can sell, and the women who assist in the kitchen can earn a bit of an income, or at least get something to put on the table at night. We also started an art program which is focused on assisting children through art, who is dealing with trauma, especially with the GBV. So yeah, we would also appreciate some funding to support some of those art centers in the rural areas, because obviously a lot of those children come from poverty. So, to be able to give them something to eat when they come to the sessions, that would be much appreciated.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, just listening to, some of the other initiatives that you have ongoing is absolutely incredible. But Brenda, thank you so much for joining us this evening, for shedding some much needed light on what needs to be done when it comes to gender-based violence, as well as sharing some of the incredible work that you and your team are able to do in rural communities in South Africa. So thank you for joining us, and I really commend you on your efforts in terms of providing some much needed support for communities across the country.
Thank you very much. And we had our board meeting today, and I was saying to the board, it really gives you hope to see that there are so many people in communities who are willing to make a difference. And yeah, we are just very privileged that we are able to support all of those people. And thank you very much once again for the opportunity to share.
It was a pleasure having you. Viewers at home, that is Brenda. She works with an incredible organization that is centered around creating much needed sense of awareness, support, as well as resources for the victims of gender-based violence, but more than that, providing education when it comes to gender-based violence in rural communities in South Africa. But their work goes beyond that. They are all about community upliftment in these areas. They work with children, and they are also involved with many other initiatives that you can get involved with as well. So please do reach out to them on any of their platforms via their website to reach out to assist them in any way that you can. We talk about how much we need to assist rural communities in South Africa, and the best way that we can do that is reaching out to organizations like this and assisting them to continue on the amazing work that they are doing to empower those communities. On that note, it is time for us to head over to an ad break, and we'll come right back.